So we see that on the client side as really enhancing that experience and allowing us to get a little bit closer and a little bit more informative to our clients in a way that's scalable for us as a $300 billion asset manager. So making sure our business can ask the right kind of questions has actually been pretty key to us getting the value out of the investment that we've made in both AI and ML. Now the problem becomes, how do you control what's going in and out of the tools? So for example, if we put the wrong data into a model and we make a business decision around that data and it turns out to be the wrong decision, right? Culturally, I've had people ask me, is it ethical to do things in AI? Isn't that going to take my job one day?
Hi, I'm Pierre Kovacs and welcome to Capital Conversations, a monthly deep dive that takes a 360 view on digital transformations in capital markets. With an unpredictable market, history has proven that business resilience is dependent on continued investments in technology. Together with our guests across corporate and investment banking, wealth management, asset management, and market infrastructure, we'll discuss how capital markets are innovating to weather the current market climate. And today, Chris Herringshaw, CTO at Janus Henderson, is joining us in our London office. Hi, Chris. Welcome.
Thank you, Pierre. Thank you for having me.
So Janus Henderson is a global active asset manager with around 320 billion US dollars, who serve individuals to institutions, and including also intermediaries like a financial advisor, right? So how are you, Chris?
Yeah, I'm doing well. A lot of travel recently. Happy to be back in London. Sunny weather as always in London, so enjoying that.
So can you tell us a bit about your background and what led you to asset management?
Yeah, so my background really is sort of the tale of two halves. So in the first half of my career, I came out of engineering school and I went directly into venture-backed high-tech startups. So the internet was just becoming a thing way back then. And so there was a lot of opportunity to sort of explore this new medium and find problems that really needed to be solved to help that medium scale. So I did a number of venture-backed startups, some successful, some spectacularly not successful, but had a great time. And then about halfway through my career, I made a transition into financial services. One of the things that was really attractive about it was they were investing a lot of money in technology to try and figure out how to leverage it within financial services. Since I had a lot of that background, it was kind of a natural transition. And to be able to operate on a much larger scale than you would in a small startup company. And I transitioned into the hedge fund world initially, and I helped build some high frequency trading systems and research platforms and data platforms, and then made the transition into asset management. For me, it has a bit of a longer time horizon on the projects they want to do, on the impact they want to have. The hedge fund world is very sort of right now, what can we do very urgently this year, this quarter, this month, which is fun and exciting, but I wanted to establish more longer-term projects that had more vision.
Chris, recently BlackRock has announced that the next version of Aladdin will ship with a co-pilot.
Yeah.
We don't know exactly what's going to happen, but so that's really with the trends of AI being more and more present in asset management, or more and more projects in AI. And there's a range of views from AI is a tool that will enable more automation, more operational efficiency, to a point that is going also to disrupt maybe the business model of asset managers. It's going to be a complete transformation of the industry. Where do you stand with this within this range of points of views?
Yeah, artificial intelligence and sort of its cousin machine learning are two areas that are really exciting for financial services. But it's interesting for me because artificial intelligence and machine learning has been around for more than 30 years. I worked on this back when I was a university student, and to see its transformation over time is a little bit strange to me, because now it's getting all this hype, but it's something we've been using all along within computer science. So two things have happened, right? So the first thing is the accessibility of enough computing power to train models that are large enough and smart enough to answer questions that are really relevant to us on the business side. That hasn't always been the case, right? I mean, we've got more power in our iPhones nowadays than we did entire rooms of computers back then. So once we've got the ability to train models and create models that are able to answer those questions, the second problem is accessibility, right? Not everyone can write code and use an API to access some of these models and to get some interaction with them. Now, with the advent of things like conversational AI, you can just ask it a question in chat, just like I would ask you a question on Teams or Slack, and you get an answer back, and it's a pretty good answer in a lot of cases. So that, I think, has really opened up people's minds to understand the power of what the technology can do. I think it's applicable to us in a number of different ways. Obviously, you talk about BlackRock and Aladdin. So taking and augmenting existing systems and process, that's going to be a huge use case for artificial intelligence and machine learning. If we look across asset management, we look across all of the processes that we have, some of them are not terribly efficient, right? We still do a lot of things manually. We still chug through a lot of data. We still write a lot of scripts in the moment to sort of go explore and solve a problem. And the idea that we would have a productivity enhancing tool that would come in and maybe do more of the manual busy work and allow our people to focus on the actual business problem, the actual decision that needs to be made, not chugging through the data, not trying to find out where the signal is in all the noise of the data that we have. If we can narrow that down and put those decisions in the hands of our people, we can expand the roles and remit, and we can expand the universe of things that we cover from a research perspective, the amount of code that we want to review before we go into QA or before we go into production. So it's really, in my view, a productivity enhancer for the enterprise.
Gotcha. So, and it's really playing in this field of more self-service towards data. So, because currently maybe having access to data, you need a data dictionary. You need people to know where to find the data, how to extract this data. Maybe also they need to have some confidence about the quality of the data.
Yeah.
And being able to interact in a more natural language. Now I don't necessarily need someone from the technology team to write a query for me, or even to create a report for me. The hope is that the user will be able to describe the kind of report he wants, and then the AI will be able to produce it.
Absolutely. I mean, think about a firm like Janus Henderson. We are big on investment research, right? We're a leading asset manager providing that research to our clients. To do that, we've got to go through a lot of documents and a lot of data. Imagine all the quarterly earnings that get published that we have to go read and we have to understand. And imagine you read all those with a set of questions in your mind that you want to go answer, but what about the next question, right? If you weren't looking for that in all those documents, you need to go back and repeat some of that research. Imagine a large language model tool that goes through and sort of not just ingests the words and indexes them, but sort of understands the nuance and the context of it. You don't have to go back and do that. You could ask it a question, and then the next question, and then the next question, and you don't have to go repeat any amount of that research. Now, artificial intelligence is not magic, right? There's a context to everything. How you train it makes a huge difference in the quality of the answers that you get. So there's the hype of artificial intelligence and machine learning, but then there's the work you have to do, right? It's sort of like, if you want to go run a marathon, right? It's exciting to do it. It's a huge achievement. It's a physical endurance test, but you're not just going to go out and run a marathon. You've got to build up to it by training over time and repeat it and have some failures and then learn from those failures and recover. Artificial intelligence and machine learning are the exact same thing. We've done our projects internally and we've released them to some pretty mediocre results initially, surprisingly. People will go in and they'll ask a question that really wasn't how we were thinking about the tool being used. And then they go, wow, it didn't work. They're like, these are not good answers. So you have to go back and you have to train, and you have to give it maybe different sets of data or set a context for how you want the artificial intelligence to view that data or maybe weight that data. And you kind of have to get all those things right before you're going to get real, I think, nuanced business answers that you want.
And with generative AI with pre-trained model, maybe there's a feeling that, oh, now it's easy. I just need to write a prompt. But what you're saying is not the case. You need to have these the tools and the governance around this. You need to sort maybe the access control and the connectors. So it's far from being immediate. A proof of concept can be relatively quick, but then actually putting that in production, you need to be much more careful, because they say don't know how it's going to be used, and you still need some governance around this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, think of it this way, right? If you trained a large language model that dictatorship was a great form of government and suppression of the people was the right way to manage them, and you asked that model questions in a generative AI sense, it would give you answers back that that's a great governing mechanism and that's a great way to treat your people. We all as a society agreed that's absolutely not the case, right? So how you train the model makes a big difference in getting the kind of answers that you would expect and the kind of answers that are valuable to you as a business. And that's a highly iterative process. It's not a one and done, it's a constant. And it's also a decaying state of understanding, especially when financial markets are moving all the time. There's world news that breaks out that affects how the financial markets operate. All of that needs to continuously be taken into account, or that model's going to decay and the quality of the answers that you get from it are going to seem sort of old and static and not particularly useful.
Does it mean it's going to be, does it increase the scope of data that you feel that you need to take into account in your scope?
It absolutely does, right? And one of the powers of a technology like this is it gives us that accessibility, right? If we think about things like maybe sentiment analysis, right? How is the market feeling? How are consumers feeling at any given point in time? Imagine one scenario where you have your researchers go out and they've got to comb through Twitter/X or Facebook or Instagram and try and ascertain a very small sample. How are people feeling? Like, what does it look like out there? Now imagine expanding that scope by orders of magnitude, right? By having a large language model be able to consume all that. You give it some context and understanding about maybe how we think about sentiment and what does it mean, and then have it go look at a data set that was previously unimaginable for us to be able to go dig into in any real way, other than standing up maybe a very large project and building a system to go out and capture the data and put it in a database somewhere. Then you've got the problem of how do you access it? How do you roll it up? How do you structure it in a way that's easy for people to interact with it? With generative AI, you put that layer over a large language model and you sort of bridge that gap. So it's greatly expanded the universe of data that we can bring into research, we can bring into trading decisions and the trade life cycle. And the key is, how do we make it accessible and useful? And this has bridged that gap.
Fantastic. So these alternative data sources, would you say that's one of the top use cases where you would use generative AI?
It's a use case, right? It's dangerous like a lot of things in the sense of there's so much data out there that we could look at that may have some impact on how we think about investing, but a lot of it not. Or a lot of it, we haven't figured out a way how it integrates into what we're thinking, and so it'll end up being a red herring. We could go chase everything and put all of our time and resources after getting more data and putting it into the process and have zero yield from that. So we've got to be targeted about what we want to bring into the financial services model that we have, but it opens the door. We can bring a lot more in once we find something that we think is going to be material.
And is there some particular use cases that you see that are realistic and you think we're going to see happen in the asset management world?
Yeah. So I think there's kind of three ways that we're thinking about it. One is certainly client facing. I mean, asset management is a financial investment people business, right? At the end of the day, we need to serve our clients. We need to serve our intermediaries and institutions who are on behalf of their clients. Clients want bespoke service. They want the data, the reporting, the visibility that they want, and everyone tends to be a little different. So the trick is, how do you become bespoke in a commodity fashion, right? How do you give them more of what they want with a little bit less work on our side systematically, right? And it's tools like this that are going to allow our teams and even our systems to be able to reassemble data quickly, pull it from multiple different sources, answer the question in a slightly different way or from a different context or in a different geography without having to go create static reports and static queries that go pull that data. So we see that on the client side as really enhancing that experience and allowing us to get a little bit closer and a little bit more informative to our clients in a way that's scalable for us as a $300 billion asset manager.
So yeah, personalization at scale, mass customization.
Yep.
And that's so that's interesting because that's really the differentiator. I don't know if you heard about the I think it's called the skill paradox, where you're in an industry where skills are getting higher and higher, and that's true in sports as well. I mean, where everybody gets more skillful, and we say, well, at this point, luck is actually a bigger differentiator because everybody is already very skilled. But here you're seeing actually there's another differentiator, which is technology. Obviously, how are you going to use this technology? And this is actually the real differentiator, because in the end you might have, maybe the analysts are very skilled, etc. But the fact that what you can bring to your client and this level of personalization is a big differentiator.
Yeah.
And so you say that's the first one. So the clients, what's the next level?
Yeah, that's a great segue. So there's a quote that I remember from way back that I read somewhere, that luck favors the prepared, right? And so in the skills paradox example, luck at some point comes to play into it, but it favors those who are more prepared to handle disruption, handle anomalies in the markets, anomalies in the asset management and financial services process. And this is where we can sort of transition to the two other categories. So I think about artificial intelligence and machine learning for the operations side of our business. A lot of complex asset classes, right? A lot of global scale, a lot of markets, a lot of disruption, a lot of factors play into it. And we need to be able to handle all those very smoothly on behalf of our clients. We need to make the right decisions. If a trade breaks for some reason, we need to reconcile why very quickly, very transparently. And these tools sort of help pull the information together to understand what's going on. So for us, it shortens that research time between, we know there's an issue. Is it with one of our systems or data? Is it with one of our vendors? Is it with the markets? Did we just get a bad trade back from market? Assembling the pieces of how that trade came together in the life cycle and giving that, like we talked about earlier, to a decision maker, sets the context for them to make a quicker, more accurate decision and get that resolved before it creates an anomaly within our operations team. So again, going back to the scope of what they're able to see, right? We can have more of our sort of problem solvers on the operations side see a much wider swath of data, a much more accurate view of the world, and get those decisions made quicker.
Yeah, that makes sense, and that's what we hear a lot with in the context of the T+1 settlement shortening. Maybe that's what you were referring to.
It's getting there, yeah.
And having these tools that can maybe initially maybe predict where the fails could happen, and so where to focus around in this, as you say, this swarm of data. What are the trades where I should be focusing? How can I speed up the gathering of data and the reconciliation of this data, etc. So, it seems that this is what we see is that's something that can really help to gain some operational efficiency and get ready for T+1. And we're including, as you say, it's a global issue. It's not just in the US because we all invest in US securities, so it's going to affect everybody.
Yeah, I think about it too. Just in terms of it allows us to change how we think about operating the business. So for example, asset management today is still quite heavily batch driven, right? We wait for data drops at certain times of the day from partners. And in a lot of cases, only then can we really start to see that there's a problem. And so when you overlay that with a regulation like T+1, it creates a lot of friction. Like, how are we going to do that faster? We've got these constrained time windows before we even start to get visibility into what's going on. So I think about that also from the perspective of it allows us to change the way we operate around reconciliation and breaks and things like that. I mean, asset management is still quite heavily batch driven, right? We wait for certain times a day that we get data drops from our partners, from the markets. And often only then can we really start to see that there's a problem. Now, imagine a system where you've got a machine learning model constantly looking at what's going on. You can start to see indicators that something's wrong. A price is wrong, amount of shares is wrong, a dashboard is wrong somewhere. You can start to see that before we get official drops back from our partners or from the markets, and you can start having people look at that, right? And so for me, that's one of the ways that we could use something like machine learning to help with T+1 or similar regulations by just changing the way that we operate.
Okay, so this is very enhanced monitoring. And I think you said there's a third aspect to this.
Yeah, so for me, and one of the exciting ones is technology, right? What is it going to do to us on the technology side? Like I said earlier, we've been using artificial intelligence and machine learning for 30 plus years, and even I've been using it for 30 plus years. It's been around for longer than that. So it's kind of been there all along. But again, now it's more accessible. The compute power, the raw compute power, the amount of data available is really opening up completely new ways to use it. So for example, Copilot from Microsoft, right? We're all sort of excited for this to really come to market and come to fruition, right? And that is a productivity enhancer that sits alongside an existing set of tools. So, I think about me having to go write a PowerPoint, right? Not my specialty. I hate doing it. If I can go in with my ideas and the concepts and the data that I want to look at and say, hey, can you give me some slides that are maybe, I want 6 slides and I want to focus on machine learning in asset management. I kind of want to hit on these 3 main themes. I'm going to get something back out that's probably 60 or 70% usable. And I just saved all that time formatting and lining it up correctly. And
relate to that.
Absolutely. And so it doesn't replace me as a technology leader needing to get my ideas across, but it does a lot of the work that is not particularly value add. I think about the same thing in translating notes. When I'm speaking to a client or I'm at a conference and I want to take some notes, putting those notes in there and then being able to go back over those notes alongside a lot of other conference notes or other client notes, or even dictation, right? If I want to listen to something really carefully and I want to replay it, the ability for Copilot to go in and dictate that into OneNote or a tool like that directly saves me from having to write and listen at the same time and miss some of the context of what's going on. And then, of course, since it's written at that point and not audio, it's pretty easy to share. It's pretty easy to put into a research system for other analysts to take a look at. Then the last pillar that I'm pretty excited about is code generation. We've had code generation tools as long as we've had code, right? As programmers, we're lazy people, I think, by nature, and we want to do things easier and easier. And we've had code generators, but the difference is we're able to sort of describe a problem, not ask for a specific snippet of code, right? And there's a very subtle difference there. And the way I like to explain it to people is we do a lot of file and data manipulation within asset management. Now imagine if I could go in, I've got a new data source that I need to assimilate. I want to do it in, let's say, Python. I can ask generative AI to say, take that file, make sure all the fields are valid, right? And load it into this database, apply some indexing, and give me back, a pointer or a starter piece of SQL for that table. And it will generate code that 90+% of the time works out of the box. And I just saved hours of time having to go through and figure that out, particularly on things like cleaning up the data and validating the data, right? Imagine all the sets of rules, like it's longer than this, shorter than this, the date's right. I mean, all those things can be pre-generated along with a conversational aspect that understands the intent of what I'm trying to do, not just write a couple of rules that I stick into my code.
And you can iterate. I mean, if you're not happy with the code that has been generated, or the code doesn't work, you can say where something is wrong. Can you?
Not that database. I want it in my data lake instead.
Which is fantastic.
Write me an adapter to get it to the data lake.
Because it's not just the one-off, like you say, code snippet, IntelliSense, and then you have to delete and start again.
Yeah.
No, you can iterate, which is.
And even that's easier than things like code repositories, right? We certainly do that. Most firms do. You have some shared code somewhere that is the right way to access a resource or a database or a file share or whatever. You put it up in a catalog, and then I can go to the catalog and I can cut and paste and then start changing it all to be custom to my use case. Still more work than just asking a tool that kind of understands the nuance of what I want to generate it for me very specifically, right? And it will come out much more usable than grabbing something from a code catalog that I drop into my script.
And we come back to that maybe in when we talk about how that affects your teams. But maybe another one. I was wondering if that's something you're also looking into, is the synthetic data generation, because that's something that is also.
Yeah, so we have a couple problems, right? So one is a lot of data in asset management, a lot of client data, a lot of market data. And some of it pretty sensitive, right? Things that we don't necessarily want to copy from environment to environment, right? We want to control confidential data. We want to control PII. So tools like this are becoming more and more commonplace to point it at an existing source of data and say, give me a fake version of that, right? That has the same demographics, that has the same relative pool sizes, that has the same relative account sizes, right? Different numbers, different names, different identifiers, different everything. And then that can generate a data set that can be used in our QA environment, that can be used in our development environment. And that's what we typically find is unless we snap, historically, unless we take production data and move it, we miss some kind of nuance to the data, right? It's not as complete in some dimension.
Anonymization is incredibly hard because it's not just about replacing the names or the ID, because people can also infer, what, depending on the positions. For example, you have some positions. Sometimes you can guess, what trades were, and you don't want to see that. So generating fake data is probably the better answer than anonymization.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because imagine any set of production data doesn't cover all the use cases either, right? We may not have, say, a client of a certain type invested in a 40 Act or a UCIT that would stress the development of code that we just did, right? And so using the generative side of it, we can make sure that those artificial records are generated to sort of test all the edge cases, in addition to having a demographic that looks like our actual production environment. So it's really exciting for us, and we're looking at applying this to our next round of development and figuring out ways to test the data that's coming out and make sure that we have confidence that it is anonymized, that it is covering all the use cases that we wanted. So yeah, that's a new thing for us coming up that we're really excited about.
That's very exciting indeed, and I'm glad that as a technologist, you're excited about that. But as a CTO, you're also the person who needs to enable this and make this happen. So as a CTO, how do you enable this? How do you make this happen? What does it mean in terms of maybe the shape of your team, the data platforms, the tools, etc. How does it work?
Yeah, so there's a lot of layers to that, as you would imagine, right? So foundationally, there's a couple things that you absolutely have to have a successful AI or ML project, right? One is you have to know your data, right? You have to have it, and it's got to be organized. You have to know how it relates together. You have to know how to tell the model, what does that data mean, right? What's more important than something else, and how does A affect B? You've got to be able to tell it some basics around that. Otherwise, you could sort of get backwards answers that weights the wrong thing. And a lot lot of organizations struggle with that. We struggle with that for a long time.
It's a difficult problem, right?
A lot of data in silos. Yep. A lot of data moving through batch processes and sort of out-of-band means. And so when you apply something over the top that's looking at all that data in situ, it becomes a really difficult thing, and you find a lot of gaps in what you're looking at, especially if you want more nuanced, complex answers. Like, you can train a model on a very specific topic. Say you've got a database that, I don't know, covers Australian securities for healthcare or something like that. But you can train a model to know everything about it with a very small data source. But that's also a very small use case, right, on the other side of it, and tends to be less interesting to investment organizations. So getting that data layer right, making the investment, to normalize it, to understand the lineage of it, to understand how it works together, it's almost a prerequisite to do anything really complex and creative with generative AI or machine learning. As we sort of move up the stack, we've got to know how to work with it, right? And this is both a technology and a business problem. So on the technology side, certainly we have to understand how to train models and how to iterate that training and how to create control points, right? Because as developers, we can't ask the model every question out there to make sure the output is good. We've got to design control questions. So when we train the model, we can run the control questions, make sure that it's kind of answering in the way that we feel is correct and in the right kind of context, before it ever goes to users. So there's a technology investment that has to happen. And that's more of that data science kind of skill set where you can understand the data, you kind of intuitively know, you can run some of your own analytics on it before you ever go and create a model and train a model. So you've really got to have those skill sets, because the quality of your model will depend directly on the quality of how you train it and how you put data into it. So we are building and enhancing our data science capability as an investment firm, both organically and hiring from the outside and bringing in expertise from the outside. Now, if we move up the stack a little bit to the business side, education is the big one. So every time we've rolled out a new AI tool, the first, say, 10 comments are, hey, this doesn't work. Hey, this answer is not right. Hey, this is broken, right? And you need to help them understand. You have to ask the right questions. You have to understand the context of the model that we've created that you're asking questions. So, we've got models that are very financial services specific and industry specific. And if you go ask it about, the best restaurants in London, it'll have no idea, right? And it's a very simple question, right? A lot of data about best restaurants in London, but the model has no idea. Conversely, if you go into like a public large language model, ChatGPT 3.5 or 4, and you go start to ask it specific industry questions from, say, the last 12 months, it has no idea. So that's not particularly useful for my teams internally. And so helping them understand the context of what we've created is a big deal. The next part is helping them ask the right question, right? Because there's questions that generative AI is good at and questions they are not so good at. Examples would be, if you want to say, what's Endava going to be worth in 3 years, right? As a company, that's a terrible question to ask a large language model, right? Because there's so much nuance that goes into that is human influence, that it's going to be terrible, right? You want to ask it, who are your major clients, and what sort of major business have you won recently, and like what geographies are you operating in? That's a great question, right? Because there's a lot of activity at Endava that needs to be sort of consumed and understood. So making sure our business can ask the right kind of questions has actually been pretty key to us getting the value out of the investment that we've made in both AI and ML.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I remember some of the early proof of concept that we did at Endava, and there's a bit of a mad scientist, element to it, and one of our lead on data and AI built system where so you had different agents which were just modeled with different persona, and make them talk to each other and keep each other in check. So one would generate a report, the other would check if the report is right, and trying to add these layers of interaction between the models to try to avoid, this, as you say, this drift, or, asking the wrong question or having something that would do. But it was also interesting to see where you could also maybe have different, you can get different piece of advice. I mean, if you ask for advice to the systems, you can have a system which is more an agent, which is more risk averse than another one, etc. And then you can you can, and instead of just having, interaction with one agent, probably what is going to happen is you're going to, as you said, you're going to have agents or models that are more specialized. One is going to be more specialized on settlement operations, one which is going to be maybe more on markets analysis, etc. And having them even within one sector, having them also talk to agents with slightly different setup and being able to maybe to analyze the output or have them iterate even almost automatically is. But maybe that's a bit crazy at this stage. But that's
that's the direction that we're thinking, right? Is we are going to have to break it down, right? And there's not going to be one general purpose everything AI engine for financial services. It's just not practical. So we've begun that journey internally, creating models for things like internal technology development, models for market data specifically, models for research specifically, because you have to get the context right and you have to sort of navigate the somewhat orthogonal requirements between those different models and how you think about data that you're getting from market. An indicator might be really positive in one scenario, it might be really negative in another scenario. And you don't want to blend those two because then you get kind of a muddy answer, right? So you need to create that sort of specialization and then make sure the business knows how to use it.
Chris, also wanted to know a bit more about the governance structure that is underlying this and the culture. How does this affect Janus Henderson's culture?
Yeah, so this is where the problem gets tricky, right? So at Janus Henderson, we've got a great data platform called DNA, which we're now able to bring together and solve some of the issues I talked about earlier in terms of making sure the data is coherent and normalized. Now we've got a great and very interesting set of tools that can do different things with the data than we're used to. Now the problem becomes, how do you control what's going in and out of the tools? So for example, if we put the wrong data into a model and we make a business decision around that data and it turns out to be the wrong decision, right? Where's the liability in that from a legal perspective? I mean, traditionally I could say, Pierre, I'm sorry, like you made a mistake. It's a human error. Like let's help you understand how not to do that again. But when a computer, right. But when a computer gives you that answer, right, it's a lot more complex. It's not helping you understand the human error you made. It's going back through and understanding, was it a model problem? Was it a data problem? Did we maybe feed data in there that we probably shouldn't have for that kind of question? And so, for us, that's one of sort of the tricky things. Another tricky thing is when you ask questions of conversational AI, you can give it data. You can say, hey, ChatGPT, take my spreadsheet and answer questions about what's in the spreadsheet in the context of whatever else you know about the world. That also gets to be a little tricky because there's data that you want to put into models like that. There's probably data you shouldn't be putting into models like that. And we need to know about what's happening there. And so we've had to create layers of auditing around all of these tools. And so for all of our Janus Henderson tools, when you put data in, it gets logged and audited, just like any other regulated system. We're anticipating that we're going to have that need. So we built that control in from the beginning. And all the answers coming out, we capture all the answers coming out too. And that goes to some of our compliance engines just to see if there's something that we should start asking questions about. So we anticipate regulation will continue to come. You remember when ChatGPT first came out, I believe it was Italy, banned it. Just flat out banned it, right? And so as a global asset manager, suddenly we're trying to figure out, okay, how does that impact what we're doing? And do we have to make a special accommodation for business in that region or data used from that region, right? So there's a lot of nuance to global regulation that we anticipate will be coming into this space. And so we've had to build layers of insight and transparency so that we can adapt later to any obligations that might arise. And certainly we have an existing body of regulation around PII and personal data protection, data confidentiality, intra-region data sharing. We've got to respect all of those boundaries no matter what we do with these tools. And so that's slowed us down, clearly, in rolling out some of these tools to make sure that we've met all those obligations before we go and put them in the hands of users. Now, the last area of governance that we think about is what are the right ideas to apply this technology to, right? if there's an idea that helps say a group of 3 or 4 people at our firm, like, okay, like that's good, but it's not as good as an idea that helps 100 people, or that helps maybe investing decisions versus more of a technology cleanup effort, right? And so the technology could work for all of those use cases, but picking the ones that are the value for our clients, that are the value for our organization, we've created a governing body around that just to sort of vet ideas, maybe stack rank the ideas and say, for the investment we're making in AI, this is kind of the order we want to go in. And oh, by the way, let's not forget about the fundamental things that we need to do first. Like maybe we do need to bring more data in and get it normalized before we even think about model creation or exposing an interface to our business.
So how does it affect the culture? Since does AI change the culture since you joined Janus Henderson? Do you feel pressure to change the culture to deal with AI?
Yeah, so culture is an interesting one, right? So, I mean, there's so much hype right now in the media and industry about AI. All the vendors are adding AI to their product names, and it's everywhere, which makes it of high interest to everyone at Janus Henderson. I get business users all the time. I get clients all the time asking, like, what are you doing in this space? It seems really exciting. Now, the hype right now is much greater than the actual yield from the technology product, but the gap is closing. So from that perspective, it's changed the way we talk about technology. It's changed the way we think about resource planning and budgeting and architecting our systems to make sure that we're ready for the coming wave of technologies that are going to use and consume data off our platforms. But from a people perspective, it's been interesting too, right? The education around generative AI is not particularly smart in the classic sense, in that it can answer with a high degree of precision a massive set of questions. It's very good at answering certain kinds of questions. And the more you train it, the better you train it, the better it is at answering those certain kind of questions. But it's trade-offs. There's areas where it's not so great at answering questions. And so getting our business teams to understand the nuance of that, it's an education for our culture, right? We've got to bring them along on that journey so they don't just sort of dismiss it out of hand if they have a bad first experience. Also culturally, I've had people ask me, is it ethical to do things in AI? Isn't that going to take my job one day? And a fair question, right? And the answer, I think very clearly for us, is no, it's going to change how your job looks, right? In the same way that Excel and spreadsheets changed how you think about accounting and how you think about dealing with numbers at scale, the same way that cloud changed the way that we think about infrastructure, right? These kinds of technologies are going to change the way you think about doing your job. And the hope is that they help sort of give you more insight, give you more intelligence into what's really going on, so you as a human being in that role can make a better decision for our clients, a better decision for your company. And I think that's the real answer. It's nowhere near smart enough or capable enough to come and replace a huge swath of jobs, just like a lot of the technologies before that people were worried about.
But it seems that we're at a point where AI can generate enough productive or interesting content, like whether it's code or sentiment analysis, etc. But it's still to a point where you need someone who will be able to review the output of AI, whether it's the code and that's fine, because we used to do that without AI. But at some point, is there a risk that we get to a point that people will get a bit de-skilled because the AI will be able to produce some code? So I don't really need to know really to be such a good developer, because AI is going to generate the code, but that means also I'm less able to validate the code. And what I'm saying for the code is true for market analysis, etc. For data engineers. So do you feel there's a risk here, or does it mean you're going to look for different skills or competencies in your developers in the future?
Absolutely. So it is a risk. It's a big risk between actually understanding what's going on and being able to generate something that just kind of handled that stuff that I don't really understand and made it work. And that is a real problem. And so We saw that in development. We're starting to see that in data as well. You know, the algorithms are producing good analysis, they're producing good graphs, things like that, but not really understanding what's going on under the hood.
And you're right, performance is like having a good, performing fast code is often, you often need to understand a bit more than just the algorithms. Yeah.
Or when it breaks, like why did my piece of code go wrong? Why did that operation take 10 times longer than it did during testing? You know, because you don't understand that you sent data off chip to the memory buffer and back, right? Because you're abstracted from that too much. So we're starting to place more emphasis on making sure we have those foundational skills, even though, you know, we're giving tools to people that allow them to sort of go faster. We don't want it to go blindly faster. We want them to have the foundational understanding of what they're doing and why they're getting the answers they are, or why they're writing code the way that they are. So it's a problem that most firms that are adopting this technology are going to have to think about and address.
And your governance framework is covering that, which is great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. Fantastic discussion. Thank you for sharing your insights on AI and data in asset management. And to our listeners and viewers, thank you for joining another episode of Capital Conversations. Stay tuned for more conversations at the crossroads of capital markets and technology. Until next time.